Ma'am, we need you to come to St. Helena Memorial. Your husband was brought in unconscious. Husband. I stood in my apartment hallway with a grocery bag cutting into my palm, staring at my phone like it had turned into somebody else's life. The nurse repeated my name, my full name, then said it again, slower, like grief needed subtitles. I'm sorry, I whispered. I think you have the wrong number. No. He listed you as his wife. Emergency contact. We tried family. You're the only one answering. My stomach dropped because 3 hours earlier I'd signed for a package in the lobby. A small box. A stranger's name on the label. The courier had been in a rush, the concierge distracted, and I'd scribbled my signature on the scanner and added my phone number beside it, thinking I was being helpful. Now, my helpful was echoing down a hospital corridor. In the elevator mirror, I looked like a woman going to meet a mistake. Hair pinned up too fast, mascara smudged from rain, heart punching hard enough to bruise. I kept rehearsing a normal sentence. I'm not his wife. I don't know him. But when I pushed through the yard doors, a man's voice cut through the chaos. Hoarse, furious, terrified. Where is my wife? And every head turned toward me. By the time I reached my building, the rain had turned the sidewalk into a mirror. Streetlights smeared into long, tired streaks of gold. My shoes squeaked on the marble lobby floor, and I could feel damp hair clinging to the back of my neck. I just wanted the smallest thing in the world. My apartment, my sweatpants, and silence. The concierge desk was half empty, just a blinking monitor, a mug, and a stack of flyers no one read. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and wet umbrellas. I was digging for my keys when the front doors swung open again, and a courier rushed in like he was being chased by time itself. Delivery for. He glanced down at the label, frowning. École. Unit 12. B. I paused, key between my fingers. I lived in 12A. He stepped toward the desk, then looked around like the concierge might appear out of thin air. I can't take it back, he said, already moving his handheld scanner in circles, impatient. It needs a signature. 2 seconds. I should have said no. I know that. But he looked soaked and stressed, and the kind of person who'd get yelled at if you returned with undelivered packages. I can take it, I heard myself say like a reflex. His shoulders dropped with relief. He held out the scanner. The screen glowed in my face, asking for a signature, the little box demanding my name like it had a right to it. I scribbled something that barely resembled handwriting. Then he hesitated. Phone number? For what? I asked, already annoyed at myself for being involved. If the recipient isn't home and calls later. It helps. He said it like a practice line, like he said it 100 times a day. I shouldn't have given it. But my brain was still in be efficient, solve problems, keep moving mode. I tapped my number in, quick and automatic, the way you do when you're not thinking about consequences. He slapped a bright sticker on the box, mumbled thanks, and disappeared back into the rain. The package sat heavy in my arms, heavier than I expected. Not a TV, not furniture, but dense, like it held something that mattered. Brown cardboard, clean edges, one strip of tape running down the center like a sealed mouth. École. No first name, just an initial. The label had my building's address and a printed, careful font that looked too neat for the chaos of delivery trucks. There was also a small note in black marker near the bottom. Please do not leave in lobby. Great. I stood there for a beat, listening to the hush of the lobby, the rain clicking softly against the glass doors. I could take it upstairs to 12B and knock. Simple. But people in my building didn't like surprises. And I didn't like being the kind of neighbor who showed up holding a stranger's box like a weird gift. So I did the cowardly middle option. I carried it behind the concierge desk, just inside the little mail area, where the security camera would see it. I wrote a note on a sticky pad. Package for 12B signed by neighbor 12A. Call/text me to pick up. Then, because I was already committed to this dumb generosity, I added my phone number again, slow and clear. When I finally reached my apartment, my hands were empty, but my chest still felt tight, like I'd forgotten something important in the lobby. I changed, put water on the stove, tried to pretend the night was mine again. The rain kept tapping at my window, steady and patient. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then it buzzed again. Something in me, some quiet, irrational warning, made me answer. Hello. A woman's voice came through crisp and professional, the kind that never smiled. May I speak to? She said my name perfectly, like she'd practiced it. Yes, this is her. There was a pause, a soft inhale, and then, Ma'am, we need you to come to St. Helena Memorial. Your husband was brought in unconscious. For a second, I couldn't breathe, like my lungs had forgotten the order of things. My husband, I repeated, because saying out loud was the only way to hear how wrong it sounded. On the other end, the woman didn't laugh or apologize. She didn't even sound surprised. Yes, ma'am. He was found disoriented near the corner of Pine and 8th. No ID on arrival. But he had an emergency contact card with your name and number. We need someone to confirm information and make decisions if necessary. I think you have the wrong person, I said too fast. My voice was thin, almost childish. I'm not married. I don't know. Are you Mrs. Cole? She asked. The way she said it made my stomach clench. Not accusing, just sorting. I swallowed. I'm not. My name is, I'm not his wife. There was a pause. Paper shuffling. A computer keyboard in the background. He listed you as his wife, she said again, like repeating it could make it true. And you answered, that matters right now. I stared at my kitchen counter like it might explain something. The kettle on the stove began to hiss, a rising, impatient sound. The clock over my sink ticked like it was counting down on purpose. Can you tell me his first name? I asked. Another pause, longer this time. We have Cole and a first initial. A, that's all. A. Cole. My skin went cold in a way that wasn't about the rain anymore. The package. The label. The sticky note. My number. It felt impossible that those small choices could be connected to a hospital call. Like the universe had taken a harmless moment and snapped it into something sharp. Is he going to die? The question escaped before I could stop it. We're stabilizing him, the woman said carefully, which was not a yes, but also not the kind of no that calms you down. Please come as soon as you can. Bring identification. I hung up and stood there for a beat, phone in my hand, listening to the kettle scream. I turned the burner off with shaking fingers. My heart was beating too loud, like it was trying to drown out my thoughts. This is a mistake, I told myself. A clerical error. A wrong number. A stranger who panicked and wrote something stupid on a card. And still, my legs were already moving. I threw on jeans and the first coat I found. I didn't bother fixing my hair. I didn't even lock my apartment with my usual double check. My hand hovered over my door like I might turn back. Then I remembered the way the nurse said you answered. That matters right now. Outside, the rain slapped my face. The air smelled like wet asphalt and cold metal. I ordered a rideshare with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. When the car arrived, I slid into the back seat and stared out the window as the city blurred past. Lights smeared into watery lines. Every few seconds, my mind tried to make a story that made sense. Maybe he had a wife and she didn't answer. Maybe he was lying. Maybe he was running from something. Maybe he was just alone. St. Helena Memorial looked too bright against the night. Glass doors, harsh white lighting. The glow of vending machines in the entryway, like little artificial moons. Inside, everything smelled like sanitizer and tired bodies. The air had that hospital temperature, cool enough to keep you awake, cold enough to keep you scared. At the front desk, I gave my name and immediately regretted it. Like speaking it here might attach it to something permanent. The woman behind the desk scanned a screen, and her expression shifted. Subtle but noticeable. Recognition. Relief. Oh, she said softly. You're here. I'm not. I started. But she was already standing. They brought him into trauma too. Follow me. My footsteps sounded wrong on the floor. Too loud. Too urgent. Like they didn't belong. We passed people sitting with blank faces. A man with his head in his hands. A woman staring at a wall, like it had taken something from her. Trauma 2 was separated by a curtain. The nurse pulled it back, and the world narrowed into one bed, one man, one steady beep. He was bruised along the temple, A cut near his eyebrow neatly bandaged. Dark hair. Damp like he'd been out in the rain too. His face was drawn tight in sleep. Like even unconsciousness was work. An oxygen line ran under his nose. A monitor blinked green numbers I didn't understand. He didn't look like a mystery. He looked like a person. Sir? The nurse said gently, touching his shoulder. Mr. Cole? I stood there frozen, hands clenched in my coat pockets so no one could see how much they shook. Do you have his wallet? I asked, because I needed something concrete, something logical. The nurse glanced at a small plastic bag on a counter. No wallet. Just these. She held up a few items. Keys, a phone with a cracked screen, and a folded card that looked like it had been opened and closed 100 times. My throat tightened. Can I see that? She hesitated, then handed it to me. The card was cheap cardstock, edges frayed, in block letters, written with a heavy pen. Emergency contact. Wife call. And underneath my name. My phone number. So neat it made me angry. So real it made my hands go numb. That can't be. I whispered, but the words died in my mouth because the man on the bed suddenly moved. His lashes fluttered. His brows drew together like he was fighting his way back. He turned his head, slow, disoriented, and his eyes opened. They were the kind of eyes that didn't miss things. The kind that would look straight through your excuses. For a second, he just stared at me, as if trying to remember a face from a life he'd misplaced. Then his gaze dropped to the card in my hand. His breathing hitched, and before anyone could stop him, his hand came up, unsteady, searching, until his fingers found mine and closed around them like he was terrified I'd disappear. Hey, he rasped, barely a voice. You came. His hand was warm, surprisingly strong for someone who looked like he'd been dragged out of a storm and dropped into fluorescent light. I didn't squeeze back. I should have pulled away. I should have said, I don't know you. I should have corrected the nurse and the universe and whoever had written my name on that stupid card. But the way his fingers held mine wasn't romantic. It was survival. Like he grabbed the only solid thing in a room that kept tilting. You came, he repeated, and his eyes searched mine like he expected me to finish the sentence for him. My throat tightened. They called me. I managed. They said, I was your emergency contact. He blinked slowly, as if the words hurt. Then his gaze flicked past me, toward the curtain, toward the hallway where footsteps and voices moved like waves. Fear moved through his face, so quickly I almost missed it. The nurse leaned in. Mr. Cole, can you tell us your full name? He swallowed. Adrian, he said, voice hoarse. Adrian Cole. Adrian. Not A. Just Adrian. Like he'd been a person all along and I'd only met him as an initial on cardboard. Do you have anyone else we can call? The nurse asked. Family. Adrian's jaw tightened. His eyes went to the ceiling for half a second, like he was bargaining with himself. Then he looked at me again. No, he said. And it was too quick, too final. Just her. Just her. My skin prickled. The nurse's gaze shifted to me, polite but expectant. Ma'am, are you his wife? The moment stretched. The beeping monitor kept time. I opened my mouth. And before I could say the truth, Adrian's hand tightened once, small, deliberate. Not a plea exactly. More like a warning. Don't. Or maybe not now. My heart thudded hard enough to make my vision blur at the edges. I hated how fast my brain started calculating. How quickly it tried to find the safest path through someone else's crisis. If I said no, would they call someone else? Would that someone else be the people he clearly didn't want? Would it put him in danger, emotionally or otherwise? Would it make the hospital stop listening to me at all? I swallowed. Yes. I heard myself say. One word. A lie. That landed in the room like a dropped plate. The nurse nodded like she'd solved a puzzle. Okay, Mrs. Cole, we need you to step outside for a moment. Doctor wants to explain what's going on. Adrian's eyes stayed on mine as they adjusted as four. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Relief. Guilt. Something darker. I'll be right back, I whispered, because apparently I was a person who promised strangers things now. They drew the curtain and guided me into the waiting area right outside trauma. The hall was a river of movement, stretch scrubs, rolling carts, murmured instructions. I felt like I'd stepped onto a stage mid-scene without knowing the script. A doctor approached, mid-40s, tired eyes, calm voice. "Mrs. Cole?" I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to correct him. My hands were so cold, I couldn't feel my fingertips. "He had a concussion," the doctor said, steady and clear. "Possible dehydration, likely exposure. We're running tests. We may keep him overnight for observation." I forced myself to breathe slowly. "Is he okay?" "He's awake." "That's a good sign." The doctor glanced down at a chart. "We'll need consent for imaging and to keep him overnight. His phone is locked, no ID, no insurance info on file yet. As spouse, you can authorize." As spouse. The word sat heavy in my stomach. Turning. "Can I clear my throat. Can I see him again before I sign anything?" "Of course," the doctor said. And then he softened, like he could see my face wasn't matching the role I'd claimed. "Are you safe? Do you have support?" The question hit weirdly, like he could sense the lie and was offering a rope anyway. "I'm fine," I said, because that's what I always said. I just didn't expect this. He nodded once and walked away. I stared at the consent forms in my hand. The paper felt too official for something that had started with a lobby signature. I was still deciding what to do when the elevator dinged and the air changed. Voices. Sharp, confident, familiar in that way rich anger always is. Like it's used to being obeyed. A man in an expensive coat strode out first, tall, silver at the temples, eyes scanning the ER like he owned it. Beside him, a woman with perfect hair and a face that looked carved from disapproval. Behind them, a younger man with a phone already raised, as if this was content. They walked straight toward the desk. "Adrian Cole," the silver-haired man said, crisp. "We were told he was brought here." My chest tightened. The name landed differently when someone else said it, like a claim. The receptionist looked up. "Are you family?" "Yes," the woman snapped. "We're his family." The man leaned in. "Where is his wife?" "We haven't been able to reach her." Wife. My blood turned cold. Because the hospital had called me. Which meant, somewhere in the chaos, someone had called them too. Or they had a way of finding him that didn't require his consent. The receptionist's gaze flicked toward me. "Mrs. Cole is here." All three heads turned at once. It was like stepping into headlights. The silver-haired man's eyes narrowed, assessing me in one fast sweep. My wet coat, my messy hair, my lack of jewelry, my face that still looked like someone who'd been pulled out of a normal life. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be—" I couldn't speak. My throat had gone dry. The woman's gaze dropped to my left hand, searching for a ring. Finding nothing. Her mouth tightened like she'd tasted something bitter. "This is ridiculous," she said, loud enough for people to glance over. "Adrian isn't married." The younger man's phone tilted slightly, like he was ready to capture a scene. The silver-haired man took a step closer. His voice stayed polite, but sharpened. "If you're here, you should identify yourself. Our son has been difficult lately. We need to handle this properly." Our son. The way he said it made Adrian sound like a project. A problem. A possession. I felt anger spark under my ribs, hot, sudden, protective in a way that didn't make sense for someone I'd known for less than an hour. I started, and then I remembered Adrian's grip. That quiet, urgent don't. I swallowed hard. "I'm his wife," I said again, louder this time, because apparently lies needed volume to hold their shape. The woman scoffed. "No, you're not." The silver-haired man's eyes stayed on me, calculating. "Interesting," he said softly, "because Adrian doesn't do spontaneous." My heart hammered. "Neither do I said before I could stop myself. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe amusement. Then it was gone. "I'd like to see him," the woman demanded. "Only immediate family," the receptionist said uncertainly, glancing between us like she hated her job. I lifted the consent form slightly, the paper suddenly feeling like armor. "The doctor said he needs rest," I said. "He's not seeing anyone until they clear it." The silver-haired man smiled again, sharper. "You're making decisions for him?" "Yes," I said, and my voice didn't shake as much as I expected. Because he asked me to be here. That wasn't true. Not exactly. But Adrian had looked at me like he'd chosen me in a room full of danger. The younger man muttered something under his breath and tapped his phone screen, like he was texting someone important. The woman leaned close, her perfume expensive and suffocating. If you're trying to get something out of this, she hissed, you picked the wrong family. My stomach flipped, but I held her gaze. I didn't pick anything, I said quietly. I answered a call. The silver-haired man's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something behind the polished anger. Fear. Not for Adrian's health. Fear of losing control. He nodded once, almost to himself. Then he looked at the receptionist. Fine, he said. We'll wait. And then, like he was sure the world would eventually bend, he sat down. The waiting room air felt thicker. Every beep, every cough, every distant cry sharpened my senses. I realized I was shaking again, tiny tremors in my hands. I turned toward the trauma curtains, desperate to see Adrian, desperate to undo this, desperate to understand what I just stepped into. That's when the doctor returned, looking from me to the seated family, then back to my forms. Mrs. Cole, he said quietly, we need your signature now. I stared at the line where my name would go. Outside the curtains, his family waited like a storm with good posture. Inside, a stranger lay on a hospital bed, holding my number like it meant something, and I had to decide, in ink, whether my lie would become action. I signed, not because I believed the title they'd wrapped around me, but because the alternative felt like handing Adrian back to the people who were already sharpening their voices in the waiting room. The pen trembled in my fingers. My name looked different on hospital paper. Too official, too permanent. When I handed the forms back, the doctor nodded once, like I just stepped into a role that came with consequences. He didn't have time to explain. Thank you, he said. We'll move him to observation, one visitor at a time. Behind me, I felt the family's attention press into my back like heat. The silver-haired man stood as I walked past, close enough that I caught the clean, expensive scent of his cologne. You're making a mistake, he said softly, for my ears only. Adrian attracts complications. I didn't stop. So do you, I said, and kept moving before my courage could evaporate. When they wheeled Adrian into a quieter room, the chaos of the ER faded into a steady hum. Machines, footsteps, distant intercom announcements that sounded like another language. He looked smaller under the blanket, like someone had turned the volume down on him. His eyes tracked me as I came in. You're still here? He said, voice rough. I'm still here, I repeated, like we were both trying to believe it. He swallowed hard, then glanced toward the door as if expecting it to burst open. They came? Yes. I pulled a chair closer to the bed, close enough to speak quietly. They think I'm your wife. A flicker crossed his face, pain, then something like shame. I didn't. He stopped, like the sentence was a trap. I didn't want them deciding anything. I figured, I said, softer than I meant to. My throat felt tight again, a constant pressure. Adrian, why me? His gaze dropped to the blanket. For a second, he looked like someone who'd been holding his breath for a long time. Before he could answer, a knock sounded at the door. A security officer in a dark uniform stepped in, polite but firm, holding a small clipboard. Mrs. Cole, he asked. My stomach clenched at the name. Yes, I said, and hated how easily it came out now. We have a delivery at the front security desk, he said. It's addressed to Adrian Cole. The courier insisted it had to be signed by the emergency contact on file. I stared at him. A delivery here? He nodded. It arrived about 20 minutes ago. Adrian's head lifted slightly, like the words had yanked him awake in a way medicine couldn't. His eyes locked on mine. The lobby box. The initial. The rain. It was like the night was looping back on itself. I'll get it, I said, already standing. My legs felt oddly light, like they belonged to someone else. Adrian's hand moved across the blanket, fingers curling toward me, but not quite reaching. Please, he said, barely above a whisper. The hallway to the security desk was colder than the ER. The floor shone too much. Every reflection made me look like a different woman, one with purpose, one with a story she didn't understand. At the front desk, the box sat behind a glass panel, perfectly ordinary and completely wrong. Brown cardboard, clean tape, the label printed in that same careful font. A. Cole, St. Helena Memorial, Observation Wing. Attention, wife/emergency contact. My chest tightened so hard I had to breathe through my teeth. The security officer slid it toward me. Need your signature. I hesitated, pen hovering, the ink point a tiny threat. Then I signed again. Of course I did. When I carried the box back to Adrian's room, it felt heavier than before, like it had absorbed the weight of everything that had happened since I'd first touched it. The air inside the room changed when he saw it. His jaw flexed. His eyes didn't blink. That's it, he said. What is it? I asked, keeping my voice steady even as my pulse hammered against my ribs. He didn't answer. He just stared at the label like it could bite. I set the box on the little tray table near the bed. For a second we both sat there, listening to the monitor beep. The silence felt thick, almost respectful, like the room knew it was holding something fragile. I reached for the tape. Do you want me to? Yes, he said quickly. Then softer. Open it. The tape peeled back with a slow ripping sound that made my skin prickle. I folded the flaps apart. Inside was no bubble wrap, no packing peanuts. Just two things, placed with intention. A cream-colored envelope, sealed with a dark red wax stamp. And a small velvet box, deep green, old-fashioned, the kind you don't see unless someone kept it for years. My fingers went numb. Adrian's breathing changed, shallow, careful. The envelope, he said like it hurt to say it. I lifted it. On the front, in neat handwriting that did not belong to a courier, were 3 words. For my son's wife. No name, no date, just the claim. I looked at Adrian. This is insane. His eyes were wet, but he didn't let anything fall. It's my mother's handwriting. The word mother hit the room like a door closing. I didn't ask questions. I didn't make jokes. I just nodded, because something in his face asked me to be quiet and kind. He gestured weakly. The wax, there's a notch. She used to. I found it. A tiny crack in the seal where the wax had been pressed imperfectly. I slid my nail under it. The stamp broke with a small final snap. I unfolded the letter. The paper was thick, soft, the kind people buy when they want their words to survive time. My eyes caught the first line and my stomach dropped. Because it wasn't Dear Adrian. It wasn't my son. It was, if you are reading this today, it means you were brave enough to leave. My throat tightened. I kept going, the words pulling me forward. And it means the woman beside you is not there for what you own. She is there because she answered when no one else did. I felt Adrian watching me like he was watching a verdict. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. How would she? Keep reading, he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. I swallowed and read the next line, and my hand started to shake, so badly the paper rustled. Do not let them tell you what love is. Do not let them rename control as family. I couldn't help it. I glanced toward the door, toward the hallway where his family waited like a storm in designer clothing. Then my eyes dropped to the bottom of the page, where one sentence was underlined twice. The date matters. If it's the 12th, don't go home alone. My breath stopped, because it was the 12th. I felt the room tilt, just slightly, like reality had loosened. Adrian's eyes met mine, wide and terrified and somehow relieved all at once. And that's when I realized this package wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. It was a warning, delivered straight into my hands. And outside that door, his family was still waiting. The letter shook in my hands like it had a pulse. Adrian didn't ask to take it. He just stared at the underlined sentence. If it's the 12th, don't go home alone. As if his mother had reached through time and grabbed him by the collar. I didn't tell her, he murmured. I never told her I was leaving on the 12th. My mouth was dry. Then, how would she? A sharp knock cut me off. Not a polite tap. A claim. Before I could answer, the door opened halfway, and the silver-haired man pushed his face in, wearing that same calm smile like armor. The woman, his mother, I assumed, hovered behind him. And the younger man's phone was still in his hand, screen glowing. Adrian, the silver-haired man said, voice warm enough to fool strangers. Thank God. Adrian's entire body went still. The nurse stepped in front of them immediately. Sir, only one visitor at a time. We're family, the woman snapped, eyes sliding over me like I was a stain. And his fiancée is here. Fiancée. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like a physical fall. She's what? I heard myself say, too loud. The silver-haired man's smile widened. Oh, you didn't know. Then the hallway seemed to part, and a woman stepped into view, like she'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror. She was in a cream coat that probably cost more than my rent, hair glossy and controlled, lips a perfect soft pink. Even her concern looked curated. Hand to chest, brows lifted just enough. She carried a structured leather bag, and a confidence that didn't ask permission. Her eyes found Adrian first. Then they found me, and I felt it, instantly, the way she decided what I was in half a second. Adrian, she breathed, like his name belonged to her. Oh my God. She moved toward the bed, but the nurse blocked her too. Ma'am, you can't. I'm Sloane Mercer, she said smoothly, as if the nurse was a receptionist at a gala. I'm his fiancée. Adrian's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to me, quick, urgent. Don't believe her. Sloane turned her attention fully to me now, and her voice softened into something almost kind. And you are? I hesitated, the lie tasting metallic in my mouth. I'm his wife. The woman hissed from behind, like she couldn't wait to spit it out and laugh. Sloane's eyes dropped immediately to my left hand. No ring. Her smile didn't change, but something behind it sharpened. How sweet, she said, the words sliding out like silk over glass. That you stayed with him while he was confused. I felt heat climb up my neck. He listed me as his wife. Sloane tilted her head. Adrian doesn't do impulsive jokes. The silver-haired man stepped forward, voice low and pleasant. This is getting messy. We should resolve it calmly. The younger man lifted his phone a fraction higher. My pulse hammered in my ears. Can you please stop filming? He didn't answer. He just kept the camera on me, like I was the villain in his story. Sloane sighed, like I was exhausting her. Look, she said gently, as if she was talking to a confused child. I'm grateful you helped. Truly. But you don't have to perform. I'm here now. Perform. The word hit harder than it should have. Behind me, Adrian's monitor beeped faster, as if his body understood the threat before his voice could. Sloane, Adrian said, hoarse. Leave. It was the first time he'd sounded angry. Not loud, just final. Sloane blinked, and for the first time her mask slipped. Not sadness. Annoyance. Adrian, she said, still sweet. You've had a head injury. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly, he rasped. For the first time, the silver-haired man's expression tightened. Son, don't, Adrian snapped, and the nurse immediately pressed a hand to his shoulder, trying to keep him from sitting up too fast. Sloane's gaze flicked to the tray table beside the bed, straight to the velvet box, and the opened envelope. Her eyes lit with recognition. Oh, she whispered. There it is. My grip tightened on the letter without thinking. What is that supposed to mean? Sloane took a small step forward, and her voice dropped into something private and deadly. That letter is not for you. The woman behind her, Evelyn, I realize now because the nurse said her name like a warning, leaned in. Give it to Sloane. She's the one who belongs here. Belongs? Adrian's hand shook on the blanket. His eyes were on the letter like it was oxygen. Don't touch it, he said, voice breaking. Sloane smiled again, but this time there was no kindness in it. Adrian, don't make this harder. You know what happens when you fight us. Us. Not them. Us. A cold line ran down my spine. The nurse stepped forward firmly. Ma'am, you need to leave. Patient is stressed. Sloane held up both hands, innocent. Of course. I just wanted to see him. But her eyes stayed on the velvet box, hungry. And I understood, suddenly, that this wasn't about me being the wife. It wasn't even about love. It was about access. I looked at Adrian. His face was pale, his jaw locked, eyes burning with something that looked like fear and rage braided together. I couldn't do this. I didn't belong in whatever war this family was fighting in hospital lighting. My hands started to shake again, and I felt the humiliating sting behind my eyes. I leaned close to Adrian and lowered my voice. I'm sorry. I think I made this worse. His gaze snapped to mine. No, I'm not built for this, I whispered. I signed papers I shouldn't have. I lied to doctors. Please, he breathed, and there it was again, not romance, not charm. Raw need. Don't leave me with them. The nurse guided the family back toward the hallway, but Sloane's eyes never left me, like she'd already decided how she'd tell this story later. The moment the door shut, my lungs finally pulled in air. Too fast, too shallow. My hands are cold and my heart felt bruised. I need a minute, I said, more to myself than to him. Adrian tried to sit up. Wait, I just need... My voice cracked. 1 minute. I fled into the hallway before anyone could stop me. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and honest. My footsteps led me past a row of vending machines and plastic chairs where a tired couple stared at their clasped hands. I pressed myself against a wall near the elevator and tried to breathe like a normal person again. This is not your life, I told myself. You answered a call. That's all. You did the humane thing. Now walk away. The elevator dinged. I didn't move. Then I heard my name. Not Mrs. Cole. My actual name. Soft. Strained. I turned. Adrian stood in the doorway of his room, barefoot in a hospital gown, one hand gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The nurse behind him looked furious. Sir, you can't be out here. I had to, Adrian rasped, eyes locked on mine. Please. My throat tightened. Adrian, you're going to fall. I don't care. His voice shook. Not if you go. I walked toward him without deciding to. My body moved before my pride could argue. He swallowed hard, jaw flexing like he was trying to crush something inside him. She's not my fiancée, he said quickly. Not really. I blinked. She just said. She says a lot. His eyes flicked toward the hall where his family waited. They say it's easier if people believe it. If I believe it. My heart thudded. Then why is she here? Adrian's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His voice dropped into something rougher. Because she's the leash. And because she knows what's in that box. I stared at him, rain and ink and wax stamp flashing through my mind. Then why did the hospital call me? Why did you write? His eyes closed for half a second, pain crossing his face. I wrote wife because it's the only word that makes them step back, he whispered. If they call my parents, I lose control. If they call her... He exhaled, and his hand tightened on the doorframe until his knuckles went white. If they call her, I don't get out. My skin went cold. Get out of what? Adrian looked at me like the truth was a blade he didn't want to hand me in a hallway. Then, from behind us, a calm voice floated in. Too close, too polished. Oh, Adrian, Sloane said. There you are. I turned slowly. She stood at the end of the hallway with the velvet box in her hand, turning it between two perfect fingers like it was already hers. And she smiled at me like she'd been waiting for me to run. Sloane stood at the end of the hallway, like she belonged to the building itself. Calm, polished, untouchable. The deep green velvet box turned slowly between her fingers, the way you turn a key you already planned to use. Adrian froze beside me, hands still on the doorframe. I felt his breath change, short, controlled, like he was trying not to give her the satisfaction of seeing him crack. Give that back, he said. Sloane's smile stayed soft. You left it unattended, she replied, almost sweet. In a public hospital. Anyone could have taken it. My mouth went dry. You did take it. She finally looked at me properly, the way you look at someone you're deciding whether to swat or ignore. I'm protecting what's ours, she said. And frankly, you should be grateful. This situation could have ended much uglier for you. The younger man's phone was nowhere in sight now, but I could feel the threat of it anyway, like a shadow. Adrian took a step forward, swaying slightly. The nurse behind him made a sharp sound. Sir, back to bed. Now. He didn't move. Sloane, he said, voice rougher. You're not my fiancé. A tiny flicker, irritation, crossed her face. Gone in an instant. Adrian, you're concussed. You're confused. You've always been impulsive when you're scared. Don't do that, he snapped. Don't rewrite me. My heart hammered, so hard it made my hands cold. Sloane lifted the velvet box closer to her chest. You know why I'm here, she said quietly. You know what happens if you walk away without it. Adrian's jaw clenched. His eyes shifted just once toward me, like he was deciding whether to let me see the whole thing. I stepped forward before I could change my mind. Why are you so desperate for a ring? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. It's an heirloom, not a winning lottery ticket. Sloane's gaze sharpened. Careful, she said. You're standing in the middle of something you don't understand. Then explain it, I said. Explain why a hospital called me his wife. The word wife hit the air between us, and Adrian flinched like it was a bruise being pressed. He swallowed hard, then spoke, fast, as if saying out loud was the only way to keep it from swallowing him. I didn't have your number, he said to me. Not until tonight. My chest tightened. What do you mean? Adrian's eyes dropped to my hands, then lifted again. I came back to the building, he admitted, for the package. I saw the note you left. Your number. His voice cracked on the last word. Not from romance, panic. I didn't know who you were, but you were outside my life. You weren't them. Sloane's smile widened like she'd been waiting for this confession. How romantic, she murmured. Adrian ignored her. I've carried that emergency card for months, he said. It had wife on it because it's the only word my father respects. The only word the hospital takes seriously. He breathed out, shaky. But I never filled in the number. Because I didn't want them called. Not ever again. My stomach turned. So you wrote mine. He nodded once. I told myself it was temporary. One night. Just enough time to get out. And the package? I asked, voice low. His eyes flicked to the velvet box in Sloane's hands. That was supposed to be mine before she got it. Sloane laughed softly, like we were all adorable. It is yours, she said, and you'll do what you always do. Choose the path with the least damage. Adrian's voice went flat. You mean the path where you win. Sloane took a slow step closer, stopping just out of reach. Adrian, she said, gentle again. If you want to blow up your life for a stranger who signed for a package, go ahead. But don't pretend you're protecting her. You're using her. The words landed hard, because they were sharp enough to stick. My throat tightened, anger rising hot under my ribs. I didn't ask to be here, I said. I answered a call. That's it. Sloane's eyes narrowed. Then leave, she said simply. Walk away, and let the adults handle it. Silence stretched. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, like a reminder that Adrian's body was still recovering even if his life wasn't. Adrian looked at me and I saw it, real fear. Not of Sloane, of what she represented. Please, he said softly. Just don't let her take it. I didn't think. I moved. I walked straight towards Sloane and held out my hand. Give me the box. Sloane didn't flinch. She only smiled, slow and cold. Or what? She asked. The nurse stepped in sharply. Ma'am, return the patient's belongings right now, or I'm calling security. For the first time, Sloane hesitated, just a fraction. Then she placed the velvet box into my palm with a softness that felt like a threat. Her fingers lingered a second too long. You're making yourself a target, she whispered, so only I could hear. I turned and placed the box into Adrian's hands. He held it like it was heavier than cardboard and velvet, like it was a decision. Sloane's voice rose again, sweet for the hallway. Enjoy your little moment, she said. My attorney is already on the way. Adrian's face went pale, and I realized with a sinking certainty that this wasn't just a messy misunderstanding anymore. It was a countdown. The moment Sloane said attorney, the hallway seemed to tilt. Not because I was scared of a lawsuit, because I suddenly understood the shape of the game. People like her didn't threaten unless there was something real to protect. Something you could sign, surrender, or be forced to agree to while you were dizzy and weak and under fluorescent lights. The nurse stepped between us like a wall. "That's enough," she said sharply. "Everyone back to the waiting area. Now." Sloane didn't argue. She didn't need to. She just smiled, slow and sure, as if she could afford patience. Adrian's fingers closed around the velvet box, knuckles pale. His breathing was shallow, controlled, like he was trying to keep his body from betraying him in public. "Back to bed," the nurse ordered him. He looked at me once. One quick look that felt like a question he couldn't ask out loud. I followed as they guided him into the observation room and shut the door behind us. The instant it clicked closed, the room changed. The air softened. The beeping monitor became the loudest thing again. Adrian sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders tense. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough. "I dragged you into this." "I dragged myself," I said, then surprised myself by adding, "because I didn't want to leave you alone in the middle of it." His eyes flicked up. Something in them warmed for half a second. Then he looked away, like warmth was dangerous. I set the envelope on the tray table. The wax seal was broken. The paper folded open like a wound. "Read it," he said quietly. "I already did." "Read it out loud," he insisted. "Please. I need to hear it in someone else's voice. I need to know I'm not hallucinating my mother." My throat tightened. I nodded, unfolded the letter, and began again. Slower this time, steadier. "If you are reading this today," I read, "it means you were brave enough to leave." Adrian's eyes closed on that line, like his body remembered pain his mind tried to deny. I continued, "And it means the woman beside you is not there for what you own. She is there because she answered when no one else did." My voice faltered. I hated how personal it felt, how the paper seemed to press its finger into my chest. Adrian's jaw flexed. "Keep going." I swallowed and read the underlined line again. "Do not let them rename control as family." The room was silent except for the monitor. Then my eyes caught something I hadn't noticed before, because there was a second page tucked behind the first, folded smaller, like a secret inside a secret. My breath caught. Adrian sat forward instantly. "There's more." I opened it carefully. The handwriting was the same, but the tone was different, more direct, almost fierce. "I need you to understand," I read, "that the ring is not a prize. It is a test." Adrian's face went still. "The woman who asks for it," I continued, "will never give you freedom. The woman who protects your choice, even if it costs her comfort, will." My fingers trembled around the paper. I kept reading, heart pounding. "If it's the 12th, don't go home alone," I read again, and then my eyes moved down. There was a final line underneath, written smaller, like it was meant for a whisper. "Tell her this. You are not hard to love. You were only taught to beg for love from the wrong people." I stopped. My chest ached in a way I couldn't explain. Not for myself, for him. For the boy he must have been. For the man he was trying to become with shaking hands and no clean exit. Adrian's eyes were wet, but nothing fell. He stared at the words like they were a door opening in a room he'd lived in his whole life. "She wrote that," he whispered. "She wrote that for me." I nodded, because my voice wouldn't behave. A sharp knock hit the door. Not the nurse this time. Not gentle. A man's voice followed, calm and precise. "Mr. Cole? I'm here on behalf of the family. We need to discuss urgent legal matters." "Attorney." Adrian's whole body tense like a wire pulled too tight. The nurse stepped in a moment later, her face set. "He's not signing anything tonight," she said firmly. "He's a concussion patient under observation." The voice outside stayed smooth. "We're not asking him to sign. We're clarifying authority. His fiancée is listed as—" "No," Adrian said, loud enough that it surprised even him. The word came out like a blade. "She isn't." Silence on the other side. Then Sloane's voice, sweet again, deadly underneath. "Adrian, don't do this. You'll regret embarrassing everyone." Adrian turned his head slowly toward me, eyes wide with something raw, fear, determination, and a question that felt heavier than the velvet box. He reached into the envelope and pulled out the second page, then held it like a shield. "I'm not signing," he called toward the door, voice steadier now. "And you're not speaking for me." A pause. Then, the attorney again, polite as a knife. Then we'll wait for a formal capacity evaluation in the morning. Morning. Sunrise. Adrian's throat bobbed as he swallowed. When the footsteps moved away, the room released its breath, but Adrian didn't. He sat there rigid, staring at the wall like he could already see tomorrow coming to drag it back. I didn't think. I reached for the folded letter and tucked it safely into my coat pocket. Adrian noticed immediately. His gaze snapped to mine. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice quiet. "Protecting your choice," I said, surprised by how certain I sounded. "Because everyone out there wants that paper more than they want you." His eyes softened just a fraction, and then he asked, in a voice so small it didn't match the chaos he came from. "Would you stay?" he said. "Just until sunrise?" For a second, all I could hear was the monitor and my own heartbeat. "Would you stay just until sunrise?" I should have said no. I should have protected my life from becoming a headline in someone else's family war. But the question wasn't romantic. It wasn't manipulative. It was a man asking for one night of safety, like he didn't know how to ask for it any other way. I exhaled slowly. "Until sunrise," I said. "That's it. And I'm not signing anything else. Not one thing." Adrian's shoulders dropped like he'd been holding them up with pure fear. "Thank you," he whispered, and the gratitude in his voice made something in my chest ache. The nurse returned, brisk and unimpressed by our emotions. "Okay," she said, adjusting his blanket. "He needs rest. Lights low. No stress. And you," she pointed at me. "If anyone gives you trouble, you call us. Not them. Understood?" "Understood," I said. When she left, the room got quieter in a way that felt almost unreal, like we'd slipped into a pocket of time the family couldn't reach. I sat in the chair beside his bed, my coat folded on my lap, the letter tucked safely inside it. Adrian stared at the ceiling for a long moment, blinking like he was trying to convince his body it was allowed to relax. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for writing wife, for dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me," I said, then corrected myself because the truth mattered. "You did. A little. But I also stayed." He turned his head toward me. "Why?" The question landed softly, but it was heavy. I looked down at my hands. "Because when they called, you didn't feel like a stranger," I admitted. "You felt like a person nobody was protecting." Adrian's throat moved as he swallowed. "My whole life. Protection came with strings," he said. "My father calls it family. My mother called it a cage." The air changed when he said mother, like the word carried warmth and loss at the same time. "She's gone?" I asked quietly. He nodded once. 2 years. His jaw tightened. "After that, they rewrote everything. They rewrote her. They rewrote me." I didn't push. I just waited, letting the silence be safe instead of awkward. Adrian's eyes drifted to my coat pocket. "That line," he said softly, "about not being hard to love." My chest tightened again. "Yeah." He laughed once, no humor in it, just disbelief. "I spent my whole life thinking if I was calmer, smarter, quieter, they'd stop treating me like I was a problem to manage." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "And Sloane," his mouth flattened. "Sloane was the solution they picked." He looked away, shame flashing across his face. "She learned how to sound like love while asking for control." I let that sit for a moment, then asked the only question that mattered. "What's in that velvet box that makes her show up in a hospital at midnight?" Adrian didn't answer right away. He stared at the blanket, fingers flexing like he wanted to crush something invisible. "The ring isn't just a ring," he said at last. "It's proof. It's leverage." He swallowed. "If I keep it, I keep my mother's last choice. If I hand it over, they get to say she would have wanted their version of my life." A chill moved through me. "So they want to force you to choose her?" He nodded once, eyes dark. "They want me to stop being unpredictable." The word unpredictable sounded like a sin in his world. I sat back, trying to breathe like this was normal. "Okay," I said slowly. "Then we make it simple. Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, you tell the truth. You don't sign. You don't go anywhere alone." Adrian's gaze lifted to mine. And you? He asked, like he didn't deserve to hope for an answer. I'm not your plan, I said gently, holding his eyes. I'm a person who answered a call. I can give you one night. I can't give you my life. He nodded. That's fair. But the way he said it, like fairness was unfamiliar, made my throat tighten. For a while we didn't talk. The hospital dimmed into night mode. Fewer footsteps, softer voices, the occasional squeak of shoes passing by like ghosts. I watched Adrian's breathing slow, watched his shoulders unclench 1 millimeter at a time. At some point, he said my name, my real name, quietly, like he was testing how it sounded in this room. And when I answered, he repeated it once more, softer, like he wanted to memorize it for the morning. I didn't notice I was crying until a tear hit my knuckle. I wiped it fast, embarrassed. Adrian's hand shifted on the blanket, palm up. An invitation, not a demand. I took it. Just fingers. Just warmth. No promises. I'm sorry, he whispered again, eyes half closed. I didn't think anyone would come. I came, I said, because it was the only truth that mattered tonight. His eyes shut fully, his grip light but steady, like he was finally letting sleep win. Then, just before dawn, the door opened and the same nurse stepped in, face tight, voice low. Okay, she said, glancing toward the hallway. We've got a situation in the lobby. My stomach dropped. What kind of situation? She didn't look at me when she answered. Your family, she said to Adrian, with clear dislike. And Sloane. They're demanding to see you before morning rounds. And they brought paperwork. Adrian's eyes opened, instantly awake, and his hand tightened around mine. Not like a lover, like a man bracing for impact. The nurse didn't knock this time. She stepped in like a referee, walking into a fight. They're in the lobby, she said, and they brought paperwork. If you go out there, I need you calm. If you feel dizzy, you sit. If anyone pressures you, you look at me and you say, I want my nurse. Do you understand? Adrian's eyes were already sharp, fully awake in a way that scared me. Like fear had replaced sleep. I understand, he said. My hands were cold again. The letter was still in my coat pocket, pressed against my ribs like a secret heartbeat. Adrian swung his legs off the bed too fast, and the nurse caught his arm. Slow, she warned. He nodded, breathing through it, then looked at me. Don't let them separate us, he said quietly. Not until I say what I need to say. I swallowed. Okay. They brought a wheelchair even though Adrian hated it. He sat in it anyway, jaw tight, like accepting help was a kind of rebellion. I walked beside him as we moved through the hallway. The hospital lights dim and gray-blue now, dawn pressing faintly against the windows. The lobby wasn't loud, but it was tense, like someone had sucked all the air out and replaced it with perfume and entitlement. His father stood near the front desk, coat perfect, posture perfect, face calm in the way people get when they believe they're untouchable. Evelyn hovered beside him, lips set like a blade. The younger man was there too, phone in his hand again, pretending he wasn't recording. And Sloane stood in the center like the lobby was her stage, holding a folder thick with papers. Beside her was a man in a suit, briefcase at his feet, eyes flat and professional. The attorney. When Sloane saw Adrian, her expression softened into practiced relief. There you are, she said, stepping forward. I've been terrified. Adrian didn't answer. His father's gaze slid to me instantly, and something in his eyes sharpened. Annoyance that I still existed. Adrian, his father said warmly, as if we hadn't just watched him try to bulldoze a hospital. Let's be smart. Let's make this easy. Sloane lifted the folder. No drama, she said softly. Just signatures. You rest, we handle the mess, and you come home. Adrian's fingers gripped the wheelchair arms. I saw the tremor in his hands, anger held down with force. The nurse stepped forward. He's a concussion patient under observation, she said. He is not signing anything. The attorney smiled thinly. We're simply clarifying authority. A fiancé can. She isn't, Adrian said. The words cut clean through the lobby. Sloane blinked, still smiling. Adrian. No, Adrian leaned forward slightly, voice rough but steady. You are not my fiancé. The silence that followed was the kind that makes strangers look up from their phones. Even the receptionist stopped typing. Evelyn's face flushed. Don't be ridiculous. Adrian's father's smile tightened. Son, you're confused. Adrian turned his head slowly, meeting his father's eyes. I'm not confused, he said. I'm done. Sloane's sweetness cracked at the edges. You're doing this because you're embarrassed, she murmured, stepping closer, voice low like she was trying to hypnotize him. You had an episode. You panicked. You clung to a stranger, and now you want to punish everyone for seeing it. My stomach turned. Adrian's gaze flicked to me, and for a second I saw something softer there. An apology without words for what I was about to hear. Then he looked back at Sloane. You weren't terrified, he said. You were angry you didn't get there first. Sloane's eyes flashed. That's not. Yes, it is. Adrian's voice rose just enough to make it real. You came for paperwork. You came for the ring. You came because you thought I'd be weak. His father's expression hardened. Watch your tone. Adrian didn't flinch. I'm watching everything, he said. And I'm finally naming it. Sloane lifted the folder again, pushing it toward the nurse, like she could override reality with paper. This is for his protection. The nurse didn't take it. Sir, she said to the attorney, if you pressure him, I will call security. The attorney's smile vanished. We have rights. And I have a concussion. Adrian cut in coldly. So here's what's going to happen. I'm not signing anything today. You're not speaking for me. And if you want a conversation, you can have it when I'm discharged with witnesses. Evelyn stepped forward, voice sharp. Adrian, don't you dare. Adrian raised a hand. The gesture was small, but it stopped her. Then he did something that made my throat close. He turned the wheelchair slightly so he could see me fully, and he spoke loud enough for everyone. She's not my wife, he said. My heart dropped, an instant of humiliation, a flash of relief, both at once. But he wasn't finished. She's the person who answered when no one else did, he continued. The hospital called her because I wrote her number down tonight after she signed for a package by accident. She didn't ask for this. She didn't plan it. She didn't come for anything. His father's eyes narrowed, calculating again. Adrian's voice steadied, stronger now. And she still stayed, he said. That's what terrifies you, not her. The fact that someone outside your control can show up and still choose decency. My chest burned. The lobby blurred for a second. Sloane's face tightened. Adrian, stop performing. Adrian looked at her like she was finally small. I'm not performing, he said. I'm choosing. Then, slowly, he reached into his hospital gown pocket and pulled out the velvet box. Sloane's eyes locked onto it like hunger. Adrian held it up, not opening it. This, he said, is not yours. Evelyn's breath caught. Adrian, it's my mother's, he said, and you don't get to use it as a leash anymore. Sloane stepped forward, voice urgent now. Give it to me. Adrian, don't be childish. Adrian's hand tightened around the box. He looked at the nurse. If I feel pressured, he said clearly, I want security. The nurse nodded once, already moving. Sloane's eyes flicked toward the receptionist, toward the staff, toward witnesses. Her smile returned, too bright. Fine, she said, voice trembling at the edges. Do what you want. Adrian looked at me then, really looked at me. My throat tightened. I forced myself to stand straighter, to exist as myself, not as a label. My name is, I said, and I said it clearly. I'm not his wife. I'm not his enemy. I'm just here. Adrian nodded once, like that mattered more than any paperwork. Then he opened the velvet box. Inside, the ring wasn't flashy. It was old gold, worn smooth in places, a small stone set like someone had carried it through years, not showrooms. Adrian didn't offer it to Sloane. He didn't even offer it as a proposal. He held it for one beat, like goodbye, and then he reached out and placed it in my palm. My breath stopped. Sloane's face went white. His father's expression cracked. Adrian's voice dropped, but it carried. Not because I have to, he said. Because I want my choice to be protected. My fingers curled around the ring, shaking. Adrian looked at me, Eyes steady, exhausted, alive. Keep it safe, he whispered. Just until I can walk out of here on my own. And as the first thin line of sunrise touched the hospital windows, I realized the ring wasn't a promise of marriage. It was a promise of freedom, and now I was holding it. The ring sat in my palm like a secret that burned. Not because it was valuable, because everyone in that lobby had just watched Adrian choose something they couldn't control. The nurse returned with security, and suddenly the air shifted. Adrian's father straightened, smoothing his coat as if manners could erase what had happened. Sloane's smile returned too, tight and bright, like a mask pulled back into place. Adrian, his father said, voice low warning, you're making a spectacle. Adrian's eyes didn't move. You made my life a spectacle, he said quietly. I'm just ending the show. Security stepped closer. The nurse spoke clearly for witnesses. The patient is returning to observation. Visiting hours are over. Any continued pressure will be documented. The attorney opened his mouth, then closed it again when he saw the security guard's hand hover near his radio. Sloane's gaze flicked to my fist, where the ring was hidden now, and for the first time she looked uncertain, not afraid of me, afraid that the ring wasn't the real weapon anymore. Adrian rolled back toward the elevators, his shoulders still tense, but his breathing different, like a man who'd finally said the sentence that had been choking him for years. I walked beside him, the letter still against my ribs, the ring pressed into my palm so hard it left a crescent in my skin. When the elevator doors closed, the lobby disappeared. Adrian exhaled like he'd been underwater. Thank you, he said, eyes on the floor. Don't thank me yet, I muttered, and surprised myself by smiling just a little. You still have to survive the rest of today. He glanced up. So do you. Back in the room, the nurse tucked him in like she was furious at the world for hurting him. No more hallway heroics, she ordered. You rest. Adrian nodded, obedient for once. Then he looked at me, quiet, steady. I need to give you an exit, he said softly. A real one. I swallowed. I was going to leave after sunrise. I know. He hesitated, then added. But I don't want you to leave thinking you were used. The word hit me. It was exactly what Sloane had thrown at me in the hall. I wasn't used, I said, though my voice wobbled. I chose. Adrian's eyes softened. Then let me choose too, he said. Let me choose you as a person, not a role. The nurse, thankfully, pretended not to hear. A few hours later, after the scans and the doctors and the paperwork that didn't require signatures from people who used love as a contract, Adrian was cleared for discharge, with conditions. Rest. No stress. No driving. No decisions made under pressure. His father tried one last time to push his way in. The nurse shut it down with the calm cruelty of someone who'd seen too many families confuse ownership with care. He's leaving with the person he chooses, she said, and looked right at Adrian. Tell me who that is. Adrian's gaze lifted. He didn't look at his father. He didn't look at Sloane. He looked at me. He said my name. Just my name. And it felt like the first honest thing in the entire story. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city looked rinse clean. Streets glossy, air cold and sharp. Adrian walked slowly, leaning slightly on the nurse's arm until we reached the curb. His father's car was waiting at the corner, engine idling like a threat. Sloane stood beside it, hands folded, face perfect. Adrian didn't go toward them. Instead, he turned to me. I'm not asking you to take me home, he said quietly. I'm asking you to tell me where you feel safe right now. I stared at him, startled by the question. Nobody had asked me that in a long time. My apartment, I said finally. Just quiet. Tea. A couch. No speeches. Adrian nodded like that sounded like heaven. Okay, he said. Sloane stepped forward sharply. Adrian, this is insane. You don't even know her. Adrian looked at her once, calm. I know what you do when I'm weak, he said. And I know what she did. Sloane's lips parted, but nothing came out. Adrian's father's voice hardened. You're choosing a stranger over your own blood? Adrian didn't flinch. I'm choosing peace over control, he said. If you want a relationship with me, you can meet me where I am, not where you want me to be. Then he turned away. And the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was freedom. The next few days were simple in a way that felt almost holy. Adrian slept. He ate toast like it was a new invention. He listened to rain sounds on my speaker and pretended he wasn't grateful. He offered to pay for everything, and I told him to stop. We watched a stupid reality show at midnight because neither of us wanted to talk about the hospital anymore. And somewhere in the middle of that quiet, the ring stopped feeling like a weapon. It started feeling like a promise to choose differently. On the third day, Adrian sat on my couch with his phone in his hand, frowning like the screen was an enemy. "What?" I asked. He held it out to me. On the screen, his emergency contact settings. He cleared his throat. "I'm changing it," he said. "For real." My stomach tightened. "To who?" He looked up. "To you," he said simply. "Not as wife. Not as a lie. As the person I trust." I stared at him. "Adrian, you can say no," he said quickly. "I'll understand." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. My heart beat hard, stupidly hard. I'll say yes," I whispered. "But only if we do it right." He blinked. "Right." "Yes," I said, swallowing. "If you're going to ask me to be in your life, don't do it like a survival decision." Adrian's gaze sharpened, like he understood exactly what I meant. He set the phone down. Then, slowly, carefully, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. The ring caught the light from my window, soft gold, worn smooth by history. "I'm not proposing today," he said, voice steady. "I'm asking you for a first date." My breath caught. "A first date?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "A real one," he said. "No hospitals. No lies. No family. Just coffee. Rain, if the universe insists. And you telling me what you want, not what you can handle." Something in my chest cracked open. "I want that," I said. Adrian exhaled like he'd been holding his breath again. Then he smiled, really smiled, for the first time. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at my door. This time, the label had my full name printed neatly. No initials. No confusion. Inside was a small notebook, blank pages, and a folded note in Adrian's handwriting. Not because we had to. Because I want to. At the bottom was a single line. "Emergency contact." My name. I didn't cry. I laughed, soft, disbelieving, and pressed the note to my chest like it could keep my heart from bursting. Outside, the sky was clear. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a choice.
If this story stayed with you, the next one is already on your screen. Click to keep watching and subscribe for more real stories like this.